Emma Dalton had always imagined her wedding day as the happiest moment of her life. The kind of day people talked about for years, full of laughter, music, and sunlight. But when the day finally arrived, everything inside her felt wrong. Not because she didn't love Matthew, she did, with all her heart, but because a heavy truth sat deep in her chest like a stone she could no longer pretend wasn't there. Even as she stood in front of the mirror earlier that afternoon, wearing a dress she had dreamed about since she was a teenager, she felt her hands shake. She told herself it was only nerves, the kind all brides feel. But deep down, she knew it was much more. Her wedding gown was simple and beautiful, made of soft ivory fabric that floated whenever she moved. Her mother had cried when she saw her in it, and her bridesmaids said she looked like she had stepped out of a storybook. Everyone saw a radiant bride. Only Emma knew she was breaking apart inside. The ceremony went smoothly. Matthew said his vows with such love in his eyes that Emma almost cried right there in front of everyone. She wanted so badly to be the woman he thought she was: honest, steady, and ready for forever. But the truth she carried hid like a shadow behind every smile she offered. A truth she had kept from Matthew for months. A truth that grew heavier every single day. By the time the evening reception began, the music was loud, guests were laughing, and twinkling lights covered the open lawn. People approached her again and again, telling her how stunning she looked, how lucky she was, how perfect everything seemed. Emma smiled and thanked them, all while trying to keep her breathing steady. But with every compliment, the secret inside her twisted tighter. Her father's business had collapsed 8 months earlier, leaving behind a mess of debts and unanswered questions. Instead of admitting the problem to the community, he had quietly let the blame fall on Emma. She had taken responsibility for the situation to protect him, believing the truth would eventually come out cleanly. But it didn't. Instead, misunderstandings grew. Rumors spread that Emma had mishandled funds. Some people whispered about it behind her back, while others simply treated her differently, without asking for her side of the story. Matthew never believed the rumors, and he stood by her through every part of it. But Emma still felt guilty, as if she had walked into the future carrying a bag of lies she never intended to keep. She convinced herself she would tell him one day. She convinced herself she could wait until after the wedding, when everything settled and they were finally alone. But standing there, listening to speeches, watching Matthew greet guests with joy in his eyes, she felt her entire world breaking. How could she promise him a life of honesty when she hadn't been fully honest herself? How could she accept his future, his trust, his dreams, when she was holding on to a truth that might change everything? Instead of enjoying her first dance, she felt her chest tighten. The lights seemed too bright, the music too loud. She excused herself quietly, telling one of her bridesmaids she needed a moment to breathe. No one questioned her. Brides often needed breaks. But Emma didn't head to the restroom or a quiet corner. She went straight through the side gate of the reception area and stepped out into the night air. The cool breeze felt like a small relief on her face. She lifted the hem of her gown so it wouldn't drag too much. But the fabric still brushed the ground, picking up dust and bits of dry grass. She walked farther and farther until the sounds of the celebration faded behind her. The music softened. The voices disappeared. And soon she was alone with nothing but her thoughts and the wide, open sky. The ranch fields stretched far beyond the reception area. Emma had grown up in this countryside. She knew every trail and fence line by heart. The land always helped her think, always made her feel grounded. Tonight, it only made her feel the truth she had been avoiding. She lowered herself onto a patch of dry earth near the cattle pens and covered her face with her hands. "I can't do this," she whispered to herself, her voice soft and shaky. She didn't mean she couldn't marry Matthew. She loved him too deeply for that. What she felt she couldn't do was pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. She felt like she had failed him already, even before their life together had begun. Her mind raced through everything she had tried to hide: the papers she signed on her father's behalf, the debt she helped cover, The way she let people believe she was responsible for mistakes that weren't hers. She remembered the day a local shopkeeper confronted her with anger, and how embarrassed she felt even though she had only tried to protect her family. She remembered Matthew asking gently, "Are you sure you're okay?" And how she smiled back at him with a practiced calmness that wasn't real. Sitting alone in her wedding dress, Emma felt the weight of all those moments pressing down at once. Her gown, once light and beautiful, suddenly felt heavy on her shoulders. She imagined Matthew walking into a future he didn't fully understand. She imagined him finding out the truth later and feeling betrayed. She imagined losing his trust, and that thought scared her more than anything. Tears slid quietly down her cheeks. Not dramatic, not loud, just slow and steady, like she had finally stopped trying to hold them back. In that lonely moment, she felt small and fragile, like a child afraid of disappointing someone they loved more than themselves. Part of her wanted to run back and confess everything. Another part of her wanted to disappear, believing Matthew deserved someone with fewer secrets. She didn't want to hurt him, but she didn't know how to protect him either. The confusion wrapped around her heart like a knot that refused to loosen. She didn't notice how long she had been sitting there. Time moved strangely when emotions were too strong. She lifted her head only when she heard the soft rustling of footsteps approaching through the dirt. Panic flickered inside her. Had someone come looking? Emma wiped her eyes quickly. Though the tears still left faint marks on her cheeks, she wasn't ready to face anyone. She wasn't ready to explain. She wasn't ready to be the bride everyone expected her to be, the confident, glowing woman who had everything figured out. But the footsteps continued, steady and sure, coming closer. Emma held her breath. She didn't know it yet, but her life was about to change in a way she never expected, the kind of change that would force her to confront the truth she had been avoiding for far too long. Caleb Rhodes had spent most of his evening working near the outer ranch buildings, far from the wedding crowd. He was not part of the celebration, though he had been invited to stop by for food later. He had known Emma since childhood, not closely, but enough to remember her as the girl who used to climb the wooden fences even when adults told her not to. She had always been brave in ways he admired quietly from a distance. But tonight, when he heard the faint sound of soft crying carried by the wind, something inside him tightened. Weddings were supposed to be filled with joy, not hidden tears. He wasn't sure if the sound was real or if he had imagined it, but he put his tools aside and listened again. There it was, a barely audible, shaky breath, coming from the direction of the cattle pens. Caleb wiped his dusty hands on his jeans and started walking toward the sound. He moved slowly at first, not wanting to startle whoever was there. The ranch was wide and open, and the night air carried noises unpredictably. Still, he felt a pull to go look. Something didn't feel right. As he approached the pens, he saw a white shape in the dim light of the moon. It stood out sharply against the brown earth and dark fences. When he came closer, he realized it wasn't just any shape, it was a wedding dress, and the woman wearing it was sitting on the ground with her head bowed. His heartbeat quickened a little. "Emma?" he called quietly, not wanting to alarm her. She flinched at the sound of his voice and looked up, her eyes wide and shiny with tears she hadn't fully wiped away. The soft dust on her dress showed she had been there for a while. Caleb stopped a few steps away to give her space. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. Emma swallowed and nodded automatically, though her expression said something very different. She tried to speak, but her voice came out thin, like a whisper lost in the wind. He noticed the way her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed the skirt of her gown. She looked exhausted, like someone who had been holding her emotions tight for far too long. Caleb didn't know what had happened, but he sensed she didn't need questions right away, she needed calm. "You picked a quiet place," he said softly, keeping his tone light, hoping to ease her tension a little. Emma gave a half-hearted smile that disappeared almost instantly. She lowered her gaze again, as if ashamed to be found like this. "I didn't mean to worry anyone," she murmured. I just Couldn't stay over there. Caleb looked back at the distant wedding lights, still glowing faintly from across the fields. Laughter and music barely reached them now. It felt like an entirely different world from the one Emma sat in. "You don't have to explain if you're not ready," Caleb said. Emma breathed out slowly, as if his words gave her a small moment of relief. But that relief quickly faded. She ran her fingers through her hair, messing up the careful curls her stylist had worked so hard on earlier. Caleb could see the weight she carried. He didn't know the full story, but he could tell it wasn't something small or simple. After a long pause, she whispered, "I feel like everything is breaking." Her voice cracked slightly, and Caleb took a quiet step forward, still not too close, just enough to show he was listening. Emma stared at the ground, trying to gather her thoughts. "Everyone at the wedding thinks they know who I am. They think I'm confident, and ready, and perfect." She shook her head. "But I'm not any of those things." Caleb hesitated, choosing his words carefully. She gave a short, shaky laugh, but there was no humor in it. "I wish." That was enough. The night breeze rustled across the dry grass, carrying the smell of earth and faint traces of hay. The moonlight softened everything around them, turning the moment quiet and still. Caleb crouched down slowly so he could be closer to eye level with her, but still kept enough distance so she wouldn't feel cornered. "Do you want me to get someone? Your mom? Matthew?" At the mention of her fiancé's name, Emma's face tightened with panic. "No," she said quickly, shaking her head. "Please. Not Matthew." Her voice lowered to a whisper. "Not yet." Her reaction caught Caleb off guard. Emma and Matthew were known to be deeply in love. Everyone saw them as a perfect couple. So hearing fear in her voice when his name came up felt out of place. But Caleb didn't push. If she didn't want Matthew right now, there had to be a reason. "All right," he said gently. Emma closed her eyes briefly, as if grateful for that small mercy. For a minute, neither spoke. They just let the quiet fill the space between them. Sometimes, silence did more good than any rushed conversation. Finally, Emma whispered, "Caleb, do you ever feel like you're carrying something too big? Something you didn't mean to take on but can't let go of?" He thought for a moment. Life on a ranch wasn't easy. He'd made mistakes, had regrets, and lived through losses he rarely talked about. He understood the heaviness people carried. "Yes," he replied softly. "I think everyone feels that way at some point." Emma nodded slowly, as if his answer confirmed something she had been afraid to admit. "I've been carrying something like that, and I thought I could handle it. I thought I could hide it, until everything settled. But today, it finally felt too heavy." Her eyes filled again, but she blinked, the tears away. Caleb watched her with a quiet kind of worry. He still didn't know what she was talking about exactly, but he could tell it wasn't something as simple as cold feet or wedding stress. This was deeper. "You don't have to tell me everything right now," he said gently. "But you shouldn't deal with this alone." Emma looked at him with a mixture of confusion and gratitude. "Why are you being so kind?" she asked softly. "We barely know each other." "Why?" Caleb offered her a small, calm smile. "Maybe we're not close friends, but I've known you long enough to care when you're sitting alone in a field on your wedding night." He shrugged lightly. "You deserve someone to help you breathe a little." Her eyes softened at his words. "Thank you," she whispered. Just then, a faint shuffle came from behind the nearby fence, probably one of the cattle moving restlessly. Caleb turned to look, but he wasn't alarmed. The animals were used to him, and he knew how to read their behavior. Still, he stepped slightly closer to Emma, just in case she felt uneasy. The moment wasn't dramatic or intense, just a small act of protection, the kind someone does naturally when they care about the comfort of the person beside them. Emma noticed his movement, and felt a strange sense of safety she hadn't expected tonight. She hadn't realized how alone she felt until now. Having someone nearby, someone calm and steady, made her heart settle a little. Caleb looked back at her. "How long have you been out here?" "I don't know," she admitted. "Maybe 20 minutes. Maybe longer." He nodded slowly. "They'll start looking for you soon." Emma sighed. "I know." The thought made her chest tighten again. "You don't have to go back right away," Caleb said. "Take a few more minutes. Breathe. I'll stay here, so you're not by yourself." Emma stared at him for a moment, surprised by how much comfort those simple words gave her. She wasn't ready to face the lights, the guests, or Matthew's loving smile, not while she still felt like she was hiding a storm inside herself. "Thank you," she whispered again, this time with more sincerity. Caleb settled down beside her, not touching, not crowding. Just present. The two of them sat there beneath the moonlight, one bride drowning in her secrets, and one cowboy offering wordless support. Emma didn't know it yet. But this quiet moment, this simple act of being found, would become the beginning of a truth she could no longer outrun. The night felt calm around them, but inside Emma's heart, everything was moving too fast. She didn't know how to explain her emotions or where to even begin, yet sitting there with Caleb made the world feel a little less heavy. The ranch lights in the distance looked like tiny stars resting on the ground, glowing softly against the dark sky. The cool breeze brushed against her cheeks, wiping away the last bits of warmth from her tears. Caleb stayed quiet beside her, giving her time to gather her thoughts. He wasn't the type to push people to talk, and Emma appreciated that more than she could say. Just knowing someone was sitting next to her, someone patient enough to wait, made her feel safe in a way she hadn't felt all day. After a few minutes, Emma looked up at the sky. "I used to come out here when I was younger," she said quietly, "whenever I needed to think." Caleb nodded. "I remember. You used to climb the fences even though your mother didn't like it." She let out a small laugh. "I thought it made me look brave. Like I could handle anything." "You were brave," Caleb said softly. "Still are." Emma shook her head. "Not today." Before he could reply, a loud rustling noise came from behind the cattle pens. Emma jumped slightly, startled by the sudden sound. Caleb stood up and looked toward the fenced area. One of the younger cows had moved too quickly and bumped against a gate. It wasn't dangerous, but it was loud enough to make Emma nervous. Caleb raised a hand gently toward her. "It's all right. They do that sometimes at night." Emma nodded, but her heart was still racing a little. Her emotions had been on edge all evening, and even small surprises felt bigger than they were. Caleb walked a few steps toward the fence to check that everything was secure. The animals were calm now, simply moving around to get comfortable for the night. He made sure the gate was locked properly, then returned to Emma. "You're safe," he said. "Nothing to worry about." Emma exhaled slowly. "I know. I'm just jumpy. It's been a long day," Caleb said, understandingly. She smiled weakly. "You can say that again." The wind shifted, carrying the distant sound of music from her wedding reception. It was soft, almost like a memory rather than something happening at that moment. Hearing it made Emma's stomach twist slightly. She knew she couldn't hide forever. People would already be wondering where she had gone. They would begin searching soon. Someone might even think she was lost. Caleb noticed her worry. "You don't have to go back right this second," he said. "But maybe you should stand up. Walk a little. It might help you breathe more easily." Emma nodded and accepted his hand as she rose from the ground. It wasn't a dramatic moment, just a small gesture. But even that felt grounding. Her dress brushed against the dirt, gathering dust along the hem, but she didn't care. She felt lighter standing than she had sitting. "Thank you," she said softly. Caleb gave her a reassuring nod. "Take your time." Emma took a few steps forward, letting her thoughts settle. She didn't walk far, just enough to stretch her legs and feel more steady. When she turned back toward Caleb, She noticed he was watching the shadows near the fence, just making sure nothing unexpected happened again. "You really are used to this place," she said. He shrugged lightly. "When you work with animals every day, you pick up a few habits." Emma walked back toward him slowly. "I always admired that about you." Caleb raised an eyebrow with a quiet smile. "Admired what?" "How steady you are," she said. "You don't panic. You don't rush. You just deal with things." His expression softened, touched by her words. Before either of them could say more, another sound echoed, this time from the far side of the ranch. It wasn't loud or frightening, just unexpected. Maybe a piece of loose wood tapping against a post, or the wind shifting something. Still. Emma's heart jumped again. Caleb noticed immediately. "You're okay," he assured her. "Nothing bad is happening." Emma took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. "I'm sorry. My nerves are all over the place." "You don't need to apologize," Caleb said. "You've been through a lot more than anyone knows." She looked down at her hands. "I keep thinking if I tell the truth, everything will fall apart. And if I don't tell the truth, everything will fall apart anyway." Caleb stepped a little closer, still careful not to overwhelm her. "Emma," he said gently, "truth doesn't break the right people. The ones who care will stay." His words hit her heart in a way she didn't expect. For a moment, she almost cried again. But she blinked it back. Not out of pride, just exhaustion. "I wish I could believe that," she whispered. Caleb watched her carefully, sensing how fragile she felt. "You don't have to believe it tonight," he said. "You just have to trust that you're not alone." Emma looked up at him slowly. The sincerity in his eyes made her chest warm, easing the tension she'd carried for hours. She felt the first small moment of comfort she'd had since the morning. As they stood there, Emma suddenly swayed slightly, not from fear, but from how drained she was. Caleb reached out instinctively, placing a steadying hand near her arm. Not grabbing her, just offering balance if she needed it. Emma steadied herself with a grateful nod. "I'm okay," she said softly. "I know," he replied. "Just don't push yourself too fast." They remained still for a few breaths. The night was peaceful again, and Emma finally felt the quietness settling into her chest. After a while, she spoke again. Her voice, gentle, but tired. "I didn't expect today to feel like this. I thought weddings were supposed to be full of joy, full of excitement." Caleb listened closely. "I thought I'd wake up glowing," she continued. "But instead, I woke up feeling like I was carrying a secret that would follow me forever." Caleb took in her words slowly. "Sometimes big days bring out big feelings," he said. "And sometimes those feelings don't match what other people expect." Emma nodded. He looked at her carefully. "Strength doesn't mean hiding everything. Sometimes it means admitting you're scared." She stared at him with quiet shock, because no one had ever explained it to her that way. A soft breeze drifted between them again. Emma lifted her hands to smooth her dress, though she knew it was already dusty. The little imperfections on the fabric didn't bother her anymore. Neither did the wind or the sounds from the ranch. She was no longer sitting alone in the dirt, breaking apart. She was standing, supported, breathing. The sky above them grew darker as more stars appeared. The wedding lights in the distance flickered softly, reminding her that time was passing, whether she was ready or not. "I guess I have to go back soon," she said quietly. Caleb nodded. "You do. But you don't have to go back scared." Emma looked at him with a small spark of courage in her eyes. "Will you walk with me? Just until the lights?" He didn't hesitate. They began walking slowly across the open field. The ground was uneven, and Emma lifted her dress slightly to keep from tripping. Caleb walked beside her close enough to support her if she stumbled, but far enough to give her space. During the walk, she took long, steady breaths. Her heartbeat, once wild, felt calmer. And though the truth she carried still sat quietly inside her, it no longer felt like it was swallowing her alive. When they reached the edge of the reception lights, they stopped. The music was clearer now, the warm sound of joy and celebration floating in the air. Emma stared at it, knowing she wasn't ready to join just yet, but she was no longer running away. She turned toward Caleb. "Thank you for coming when you heard me," she said quietly. "I didn't know how much I needed someone tonight." Caleb looked at her with gentle understanding. "You'd do the same for anyone." She smiled softly. "Maybe, but I'm glad it was you." The moment felt calm, honest, and steady, just what she needed. And though the hardest parts of the night were still ahead, Emma felt something she hadn't felt in hours. She felt like she was going to be okay. Emma stood at the edge of the reception area with Caleb beside her, the glow of lights warming the cool air. She could hear laughter, music, and the soft clinking of glasses. It sounded cheerful, everything a wedding should be. Yet inside her heart, she still felt that quiet storm she hadn't been able to escape all day. She wasn't ready to walk back into the crowd just yet. She needed a moment to breathe, to gather the words she had kept locked inside for months. Caleb understood, without needing to ask. He gave her a small nod before stepping back. "I'll wait here." Emma offered him a grateful smile. For the first time that night, the idea of facing her truth felt less impossible. She walked slowly toward the reception, the soft lights guiding her like a path back to reality. Every step reminded her of the vows she had exchanged just hours earlier, the promises she made, the trust Matthew had shown her, and the secret she still held. A deep breath filled her chest as she finally stepped into the warm glow of the lights. People immediately noticed her smiling, waving, calling her name with excitement. "There's the bride. Emma! We were wondering where you went. You missed the cake cutting." Emma returned their smiles politely, but her heart kept drifting toward one person, Matthew. He was standing near a table, talking to a few relatives. When he turned and saw her, his whole face lit up with relief and tenderness. He excused himself from the conversation and walked quickly toward her. "There you are," he said softly, his eyes full of concern. "I was starting to get worried." Emma swallowed, trying not to let her emotions show too strongly. "I'm sorry, I just needed a little fresh air." Matthew's expression softened. "That's okay. Weddings can be overwhelming." He offered her his hand, and she took it. The familiar warmth made her heart ache. She loved him, that wasn't the problem. The problem was the truth she had hidden, because she loved him too much to hurt him. But tonight, she realized hiding the truth hurt even more. Matthew led her to a quieter corner away from the crowd. "Are you feeling better?" he asked. Emma nodded, though her stomach twisted. Matthew immediately sensed the seriousness in her tone. He gently guided her to sit on a small wooden bench under the fairy lights. The music played softly in the background, far enough away that their voices wouldn't be drowned out. He turned toward her, his expression full of patience. "Okay," he said. "I'm listening." Emma stared at her hands for a long moment before speaking. She could feel her heartbeat in her throat. Her fingers trembled slightly, and she tried to steady them by pressing them together. "Matthew, there's something I should have told you a long time ago," she began. "Something about my dad's business." Matthew's face didn't harden or tense. He simply waited, encouraging her to continue. "You remember when the rumors started? When people said I mishandled money?" she asked quietly. "I remember," Matthew replied, "and I never believed a word of it." Emma nodded, appreciating his faith in her more than he knew. Matthew's eyebrows raised a little in surprise, but his eyes stayed gentle. "Why?" Emma looked down, feeling the weight of her answer pressing against her heart. "Because it was either me or my father," she whispered, "and I couldn't let him carry the blame. Not when he was already struggling." Matthew stayed silent, giving her space. "My father made mistakes, Emma continued. He signed deals he couldn't keep up with. He borrowed money without telling anyone. When everything fell apart, he was so ashamed he couldn't even face our family. I stepped in and took responsibility because I thought I could protect him. Tears filled her eyes again, but she blinked them back. But it didn't stop anything. People still whispered. They judged me. They assumed things. And I let them, because telling the truth felt like betraying him. Matthew leaned slightly forward, his eyes searching hers. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell me? Emma took a shaky breath. At first, because I didn't know how. Then, because I waited too long. And the more time passed, the harder it became. I kept thinking I'd tell you after the wedding preparations were done. Then I said I'd tell you after the invitations, or after the planning meetings. And today, when I saw you standing at the altar, looking at me with so much trust, I felt like I had no right to deserve that. Her voice shook. I felt like a liar. Matthew's expression softened even more. He reached out slowly and placed his hand over hers. Emma looked up in surprise, expecting anger or disappointment. Instead, she found warmth. Emma, he said gently, you're not a liar. You were trying to protect someone you love. I may not agree with how you handled it, but I understand why you did. Emma's breath hitched. She hadn't expected understanding. She had prepared herself for the possibility that he would feel betrayed. You're not angry? She asked softly. Matthew shook his head. No. Hurt that you carried this alone? Yes. A little. But not angry at you. I'm more upset that you felt you couldn't come to me. Emma covered her mouth with her hand, trying to control the emotion rising inside her. Matthew gently pulled her into a soft embrace, careful not to overwhelm her. She rested her forehead against his shoulder, letting the comfort wash over her. After a quiet moment, Matthew pulled back enough to look into her eyes. Whatever happens in your family happens in mine now, too. You don't have to face these things alone ever again. Emma nodded, tears slipping quietly down her cheeks. I'm so sorry, she whispered. Matthew brushed her cheek gently with his thumb. You don't have to apologize. I just need honesty moving forward. That's all. Emma let out a breath she felt she'd been holding for months. The secret that once felt like a mountain on her chest now felt lighter, shared. Matthew stood up slowly and offered her his hand. Come on, he said with a warm smile. Let's take a walk. Just you and me. Emma took his hand, feeling steadier. As they walked away from the crowd, she felt like she had stepped into a new chapter. One where truth wasn't something to hide, but something to build a future on. The moonlight guided them across the field, the same field where she had sat in fear just an hour earlier. Now, that fear seemed smaller, not gone completely, but no longer controlling her. They talked more as they walked about her dad, about the debts, about how they could face everything together. Matthew didn't pull away or grow cold. He listened. He asked questions. He reassured her with every step. By the time they returned to the reception area, Emma felt like a different woman. Not perfect, not completely free of worry, but honest, connected, supported. She finally felt ready to face her future not because everything was fixed, but because she was no longer facing it alone. Emma followed Caleb back toward the ranch house, her steps slow and unsure, as if every movement reminded her of the mistakes she believed she had made. The dust around them settled gently, and the sky had begun to shift into soft evening colors. The golden light fell over everything, making the world feel calmer than her heart felt. She held the edges of her wedding dress away from her shoes so she wouldn't trip again. It was strange to her that she was still in that dress, still dressed for a ceremony she had run away from. She felt like she was walking between two worlds, the world she should have been in, and the world she had created by running. Caleb walked a few steps ahead of her, but he kept turning back to check on her, making sure she wasn't overwhelmed or lost in her thoughts again. His calm presence helped her more than he knew. She felt safe around him, not because he always had the right words, but because he never judged her. He treated her as if she was still the same person he had known when they were kids, even though she felt like she had changed too much. When they reached the porch, Caleb opened the door slowly, giving her time to gather herself. Inside, the ranch house smelled of warm wood and the faint scent of coffee from earlier. The simple smell reminded Emma of normal life, the kind of life she thought she had ruined. She sat on the couch, smoothing her dress over her knees, and took a deep breath. Caleb brought her a glass of water and sat across from her, waiting. He didn't push her to talk, but she knew she needed to. It was time to tell the truth, not only to him, but to everyone she cared about. She began by explaining everything in small steps, almost as if she feared the story would break apart if she rushed it. She told him about her father's financial trouble, the confusion, the panic she felt when she discovered documents with her family's name at risk. She explained how she had believed taking the blame would protect everyone else, especially her fiancé, who had already been under a lot of pressure. She feared that if he knew, he would feel trapped in a marriage built on a problem he didn't create. She didn't want to pull him into a future where he had to carry her family's mistakes. Caleb listened with full attention, not interrupting even once. His expression softened with understanding, and when she finished, he let a quiet moment pass. Then he told her something she had never considered. He said that hiding the truth to protect others doesn't erase the problem. It only makes someone carry it alone. He said she didn't need punishment. She needed support. He told her that people who care about her would rather walk beside her than be shielded from her by secrets. His words were simple, but they reached directly into the parts of her heart she had tried to ignore. Emma felt tears rise again. But this time, they didn't come from panic or guilt. They came from the relief of finally sharing what she had carried for so long. She realized something she had never fully admitted. She had been punishing herself far more harshly than anyone else ever would. She had convinced herself that suffering was the only way to correct the past, and she had forgotten that honesty could also bring healing. After a few minutes, Caleb offered to drive her back to the wedding venue. The thought made her nervous. She imagined everyone searching for her, confused, worried, and maybe even angry. But she also knew she couldn't hide anymore. She had to face them, not with fear, but with honesty. She nodded, agreeing to return, even though her heart thudded heavily inside her chest. Caleb grabbed his keys and held the door open for her. She took a deep breath and stepped outside again. The drive back felt longer than the distance actually was. The road looked familiar, but she saw it differently now, as if her perspective had shifted. She kept thinking about her fiancé, how he had waited at the altar, how worried he must have been when she disappeared. She thought about her mother, who had planned and prepared so much for the day. She wondered what they would think when she walked back in. Caleb reminded her gently that telling the truth was better than imagining the worst. His words helped steady her, even if just a little. When they reached the venue, evening light stretched across the fields, and the warm glow from the hall windows told her people were still inside. She stepped out of the truck, her dress brushing softly against the gravel. Her heart pounded, but she kept walking. Some guests noticed her first, and whispers spread quickly. Her mother rushed toward her. Worry etched across her face. Emma expected anger, but instead, she was pulled into a tight, trembling embrace. That alone brought tears to her eyes. Her fiancé approached next, moving slowly, watching her carefully as if afraid she might disappear again. She couldn't meet his eyes at first, but when she finally did, she saw hurt and confusion, but also hope. She apologized, explaining everything from beginning to end, her voice shaking but steady enough to reveal her sincerity. She told him she had run because she felt unworthy of starting a life together while carrying a mistake that wasn't even fully hers. She said she had thought she was doing the right thing, even though she now knew it had only caused more pain. He listened longer than she expected. The silence was heavy, but it didn't feel destructive. When he finally spoke, his words surprised her. He said he wished she had trusted him enough to share the truth earlier. He reminded her that a marriage wasn't about perfection. It was about facing the world together, even the hard parts. He told her he cared for her. Not because she made everything easy, but because she was human, sincere, and always tried to protect the people she loved. His forgiveness didn't come instantly, but it came honestly. The family and guests slowly gathered around them, offering comfort rather than criticism. Emma felt overwhelmed, but not in the same painful way as before. This time, she was surrounded by support. She realized the punishment she believed she deserved had been born from fear, not truth. And the relief she felt now came from facing the very thing she had been running from. Later that night, after the crowd settled and conversations grew calmer, Emma stepped outside to breathe in the fresh, cool air. Caleb joined her, leaning casually against one of the wooden posts near the porch. She thanked him, not just for saving her physically earlier in the day, but for helping her emotionally find her way back. He shrugged in his humble way, saying he only did what any friend would do. But she knew his presence had made all the difference. The day had started with confusion, fear, and guilt. But it ended with clarity. She had learned that hiding pain only makes it grow, while sharing it makes it lighter. She also learned that running from problems only makes them seem larger, while facing them makes them manageable. Emma walked back inside with a calm heart, finally ready for whatever came next. She wasn't perfect, but she wasn't meant to be. She was honest now, stronger, and surrounded by people who cared. The real punishment had never been something she needed. What she needed, and what she found, was courage. Courage to tell the truth, courage to accept help, and courage to let herself be forgiven. And for the first time that day, she felt light, truly light, because she finally understood that healing begins the moment someone stops running.